All right. It is a great pleasure to be invited to come to speak with you here today. My understanding is I have 25 minutes, so I'll be keeping an eye on our timekeeper here. And I had some odd things happen to me when I connected my slide deck here because I seem to get some strange effects. Come on. There we are. Weird. Okay. Technical wizardry. So I won't go through any of this because I was introduced with this information. Just a little bit about here. Yes, we're way better than Google Maps. Is that I won't bore you senseless about the company I work for, but basically I think the message to take away from here is big. We have the world's best representation of the physical globe as it is right now in digital format. The views I present in this deck are my own. They are not meant to represent the views of the company that I work for. I was just queuing up my, sorry, there we are. I was just queuing up my web pages for this presentation. I was proud to see that my profession exists on Wikipedia. I was just glancing at it this morning. Hey, where'd it go? That one. There we are. So I was glancing through it this morning as I was mentally preparing for this talk, and I have to admit is that looks good. I don't really see anything I object in there, so I didn't go in and edit. I will give you a task. If we look at the language bar, I see that Finnish, the country I lived in for about 17 years, is represented here on the side, but I see Portuguese is missing. So maybe one of you all can go and correct that problem after the end of today's session. So, fun aside, there are many opinions about what technical writing is. I was just at a conference in Copenhagen run by TCeurope, the organization for technical writers in Germany. And it was suggested that we're disciplined. One of the reasons you see so many different titles associated with this job is that the people within the discipline do a great variety of things. Now, for you here today, that is actually, I think, a very positive thing because it means you can find the thing that motivates you, the thing that gets you up out of bed in the morning. Think about this. We spend a huge amount of our waking lives at work, right? You will spend a shockingly large amount of your life, particularly the bit where you're conscious, at work. You should do something you enjoy most of the time. I'm not saying all of the time because, that would be a hobby and you don't get paid for that. There are practical matters to keep in mind. But there's a great variety of things for technical writers to do, and hopefully you can all find your passion in the field and find your way to a job that pays you money to exercise that passion. But how do we all know that we're technical writers? I've said for many years that this is the core of what we do. Right, so you've already heard some of these things in the previous presenter's presentation, which was excellent, so we do three things. We analyze the audience that is going to be reading our documentation. People don't come to us just to read our content. If you're writing the great novel at work, you're stealing money from your company because that's not what you're paid for. I was actually looking at the bottom of this list. There's a list of people who actually wrote great novels while they were doing technical writing. Two completely different things. If you want to be a creative writer, copywriting is more for you, not technical writing. So you have to understand what your audience is trying to do. Is that people only come to us with a very specific problem. Typically, I can't get my washer to work. How do I start using my new phone? My computer's doing weird things. Should I be worried about it? a whole variety of things. You need to have a deep understanding of your audience. Having that understanding of your audience and what tasks they're trying to achieve, you need to be able to understand what information needs to be given to them so they can achieve their goals. You need to be able to collect, collate, write, create, whatever it takes to get that information together. You need to get it verified by the appropriate people who understand the piece of the product that you're writing about in order to ensure that the content is actually correct. In some industries, say like aerospace or medical, if you get it wrong, people die. So your job, I don't mean to say that to scare you, but what it means is your job is deeply interrelated with all sorts of very strict control mechanisms about what gets changed when and by who has authority to change things. Right? So I once talked to a lawyer about this. No writer in Europe has ever been successfully sued for the document that they have published. People have been sued, but not successfully, because the courts interpret that the companies that employ the writers need to make sure the systems are in place, that the documentation is actually correct and fit for purpose. So you are part of a bigger team in doing all this stuff, but you're the one who takes the comments from person X and actually makes the changes as agreed, if you're living in that kind of industry. I work in developer documentation. I don't care about any of this stuff. We don't have regulatory requirements. I'm sure the medical technology people do, but that's not my field. So, and then you need to be able to deliver this information that you've gotten through whatever process your company has in a channel that people can actually use it, that it's usable. Right? It doesn't matter if it's like, your huge manual. Who on earth can use that? I mean, you can use it to prop open a door, so I suppose it's a safety feature that way. But yeah, if on page 5,000 there's a thing of don't press this button at the same time because then it blows up, well, nobody's going to find that. Right? You should probably have a sticker on the thing saying don't press this. At which point half the people buy the product will press it. Right? So so what do you need to be a technical writer? I thought I would, since I don't think any of you are very familiar with the field, aside from the folks who are here to present and organizing. Basically, this list could be as long as you want it to make. So to me, one of the key things is that I'm in a company which has hundreds of products, so you need to be able to understand how you yourself personally learn quickly. So you need to be a step into a project, learn instantly what needs to be done, and do it. I'm in a job where I get paid to learn stuff. I love that. But that needs to be one of the things you enjoy doing. Everybody learns differently. You need to know what your own learning mechanism is. And when you go into a job, you need to make sure that you clarify that I expect to get blah, 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 because that's how I can be successful. You need to be comfortable with just a stack of tools. You use whatever tools are required. Different jobs have different tools requirements. And so that means you need to be able to figure out how to Google and learn stuff quickly. You need good interpersonal skills. A good friend of mine who is also in the industry said that she was shocked by how little time she spent writing and how much time she spent actually interacting with people. Unlike translation, which can be very isolating, you never see anybody, you just... Technical writing, you're always interacting with all the various people in the stack to get the product out the door. Marketing, sales, support, engineering, product management, information technology people, all sorts of people. And it's actually one of the secret little things is the technical writers usually know more about what's going on in the company than anybody else. Because we're interacting with everybody, not at a slide deck level, but at a granular what's really happening level. So we have secret powers. Is that you need to understand your audience, you need to understand the product, you need good time management skills because you never have enough time and you always need to keep money in mind. You need to have a thick skin. Think about it. So I work in a profession, our species is the only species that writes. Other species use tools. Crows in New Zealand, etc. Other species communicate. Now, what that means is a sort of a more open question, but certainly other species do communicate. We're the only ones that write. We spend a significant amount of our early lives learning how to write and how to read. It is in some ways, it is a fundamental representation of who we are. Given that, you need to be prepared that somebody comes in, quote, first words I had in a review meeting, this is shit. Sorry to be sort of use poor language. You need not to take that personally. It has what you write and who you are as a person are two completely different things. Right? It's just part of the give and take of getting a document correct. That person, by the way, was famous for he's really brilliant, but he was famous for being just really poor interpersonal skills. You know, by the way, I don't say writing. That's assumed. You need to be the kind of person who sits down and with a blank page and just starts writing. However, whatever you need to do to make that happen, you just need to be able to do that. But I'm not here to talk about the field in general. I'm here to talk about writing for specialized audiences. So, what do I mean by that? Right? It all comes down to that audience analysis vertical. Most of the examples I will give now here in the rest of this presentation will be around developer documentation. That is my area of specialty for many, many years. It is all I ever talk about. I have friends who run in the other direction when I start talking about my industry because they're like, oh God, not that again. But writing for specialized audiences means that you as a writer have invested a considerable amount of your time having a real fundamental grasp of the challenges that your audiences face. Now that's very vague. Let's try to break that down and make that very concrete, right? So what it means is you're not writing for generalized audiences. You have a very specific audience base in mind. So for me as a developer documentation person, the only people I ever write for the last 10 years have been software developers who are using either a set of APIs or an SDK or some sort of programming interface that they use to achieve a tangible goal. That means I know the tools they work with, the methodologies they work with, the things they hate, the things they like. I know many of them personally. Of course, not nearly all of them, because there's hundreds of thousands and millions of them. But, you know, I've interacted with these people for about 10 years, right? And these people, right, each one is different. There are different ways of being developers, right? So I also have a sense of the subgroups within the field, right? I personally am now better at REST API developers who are full-stack web developers, because that's what I've been working with recently a lot. I saw somebody waving hands. Okay, all right, never mind. I have a lot of experience with C++ developers, so object-oriented developers. I personally cannot write code. In fact, if you're employing me as a software engineer, you're in serious trouble. But I can read code to the extent that if somebody gives me a chunk of code, I can understand what's going on. Right? That is not a small investment of my time to be able to get to be in that position, right? If I was a person who worked in the medical industry, it would be the same thing, except I would know the technicians who were using this Da Vinci thing, doctors or nurses or whoever would be using it, right? Is that if I was working for any other kind of medical equipment, I would know very deeply the legal requirements of that kind of documentation. There are EU standards for those things, and other countries have other standards. I would have to understand what that means in practice. That typically would mean attending some sort of training or workshop or something because the standards sometimes leave some of the details to national standards bodies. You need to understand how all that works together. That is also not a small investment of your time, right? So basically this writing for specialized audiences comes down to you saying that I feel enough kinship with this special group of people that I will spend a not small amount of my professional life understanding their problems, keeping an eye on them. So I understand when I'm doing the document creation and consultation process, because it can often be that you actually are not writing the document's being written by an engineer, or I say co-ownership here, right? So API reference, it's insane to have somebody else do the API reference. The person who actually writes the code needs to comment their code. That's what that means. So, they write that themselves. I will often edit it, but they write the initial draft, because anything else just doesn't make financial sense. Right? But I will often consult with them about, don't do this, do that, don't do that, do this other thing, because they may be writing for their peers, but they're hired for their coding skills. They're not hired for their writing skills, right? They are hired for their engineering skills. They're not hired for their writing skills. They can write. They're trained professionals, but they need a lot of guidance to understand, well, what is it that I actually need to write here? Because you get two responses. Either they don't write anything, or they write everything that they've done since the age of 12 in the document, right? And you sort of don't need either one of those. And then, of course, is that for specialized audiences, you often will have specialized delivery channels or specialized delivery items. For software documentation, developer documentation, it's examples. As simple as that. So I just thought I'd give you some examples of the 10 minutes, so I better hurry up. All right. Oh, and by the way, how do I know about my audience? So Michael Meng, who leads a team at a technical university in Vandenberg, has given a talk at Write the Docs. 30 minutes. I don't have 10 minutes to go through it in the 10 minutes I have time here. He has an excellent presentation about how developers consume information here. Stack Overflow has an annual survey of 64,000 developers, right, which gives you quite a little granular detail about what they're doing. So there are places to go and analyze, what your audience group is doing. I'm sure the medical people will also have research along these lines. So this is the kind of stuff I do. So that's the Android developer documentation. So there were writers and engineers involved in this. This represents a lot of money. Look at how many words that has. Right? We have Mozilla developer documentation. We have Facebook developer documentation. Twilio, which is a product you've never heard of, but is popular among developers. And so my colleagues of mine in the profession were involved in creating all of this stuff. Right, so just to give you a sense of what we're talking about. Moving along, since I got too passionate about my presentation earlier on. So there are many ways of being a writer. Writers do different things. I know writers who are more generalists. So they have a basic toolkit for audience analysis, but they don't spend a lot of time focusing on specific audience subgroups. It's where I have several colleagues that work very well for them. They just move from one industry to the other, and they just have that content creation, process management, and delivery channel done pretty strongly. And they have enough audience analysis basic toolkits that if they're given a new audience, they can work their way through it. I like specialization because I really like developer documentation for the intellectual challenges it proposes. It means then that there are fewer jobs I can apply for, but I fit the requirements better for the jobs I do apply for. And I can often actually extort more money from my employer because I have a specialized skill set and that is worth money. But you need to make that case to the people during your, negotiations over payment. I personally think there's just too many things in this discipline to be able to command everything, legislative stuff, all this other stuff. It's just too diverse. You either need to be part of a team or you say, this is my chunk and I will just trust my colleagues to do the other chunks. And I also say you're more likely to find a job you enjoy with the caveat that the specialization needs to be something you enjoy doing. Yep. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the current market. So yeah, I saw the same TechCom survey results, 85,000 technical writers in Germany. They're predicting at least 4,000 or 5,000 need for 4,000 or 5,000 writers, I think, in the near future, because some of those people are going to retire. There are training programs at technical universities in Germany, but they don't produce enough candidates out of them. I myself am by training a historian. Half the people in the field in Finland have no formal training, even though we have 3 university programs now. It's typically the older people who came in before the training was there and learned on the job. This is a journeyman profession in many ways. The training institutes do a fine job, but it's so broad they can't train you for everything. They have to give you a basic toolkit and then you go out and learn on the job. So it's sort of an internship style thing. Is that you can typically tell if the export industry in a country is doing well, the technical writing industry in the country is doing well. We're typically employed by exporters, right? So it's also, for me, in Finland, it's been a very welcoming field for foreigners, right? So cross-European movement, I think, is a little easier in this field than it is in others. Typically, in Finland, 95% of the writers are Finnish, 99% of them write in English. Germany, it's a little different. You still have people writing in German, I think the majority, but also you have people writing in English, right? So it is a transportable skill, I think. So I wanted just to, how much time do I have? 5 minutes? Good. Sorry, I whizzed through things, but I just did some random searching for job ads, just to give you a sense, right? So this is the Berlin startup site. As Alexandra said, I'm currently based in Berlin. So I could apply for that first job. I have know nothing about medical technology, but cloud-based stuff. This sounds to me like they're looking for a developer. UX writer, I'm not a good UX person. I have no sense of style, so that's for other people. Marketing copywriter, oh my God, they would be doomed if they got me as a marketing copywriter. I'm incredibly literal, right? So this is more creative than I can do, right? Again, you can kind of see how my mind works with the specialization. And by the way, just to give you a sense of salaries, there's a salary research here. So, and by the way, my field is terrible. Look at the 25% pay gap between men and women. In Finland, by the way, for years, women got paid more than men. Our most recent survey, now the men get paid 12 euros more a month than the women. So, we need to correct that. That gives you a sense of the salaries. I think in Finland, it's about the average medium salary is about 2,200 something a month, which is low for a professionally educated person, but above the average salary. So we're kind of underpaid, but not severely so in Finland. In Poland, actually, you're relatively well paid because you need to be able to write in English and speak Polish. And you typically work for a multinational company that has money. So on a European level, you don't necessarily get paid well, but in the Polish context, you get paid well because not a lot of people write in English and speak Polish. I'm sure the Portuguese market has its own unique features. Yeah, so they're all like that. And then here's the TCeurope job posting site. And here's another example, what I was talking about specialization. So this is a medical thing. First is in German, so I'm not going to apply because I don't write German. Second, it's for medical stuff. I have no idea how medical stuff works. More importantly, I don't understand the processes behind the regulatory requirements. So this is not for me, right? But again, you can see how specialization ties to the job advertisements, right? So if you understand that and you speak German, well, then you're like, okay, then that means the recruitment manager is going to look at your CV and say, okay, this person fits that profile, that person doesn't. All right, it's as simple as that, because of course that first round is what you want to do is you want to get to the interview. Right? You're not going to get hired in the first round. You just want to get to the place where somebody invites you in. So I just said you need experience in order to get a job. How's that for a terrible catch-22? If you need a job to get experience, as I just said, a journeyman profession, but you can't get a job unless you have experience, I think the word deeply frustrating comes to mind, to be polite. I do think developer documentation offers you some opportunities. There's a lot of open source projects in the world. Most writers tend to be quite mercenary. Unless you pay us, we're not going to write anything. We're not coders. We don't stay up all night coding stuff because it's cool. We want to be paid. But What that means is that, say, for example, Mozilla has an open source project. You can just Google it. There's a volunteers page, and they want people to correct typos and do translations into Portuguese, presumably, or perhaps help them with their documentation. I know the Data Open Toolkit documentation has a GitHub that is also open source. I will show what that looks like here. So here's the Mozilla page, just so you know what you'd be looking for, and somewhere here there's a volunteer thing, and this is what the Data Open Toolkit documentation GitHub page looks like. So there are lots of projects out there looking for free labor, so sorry. But it is potentially useful in several different ways. One is it gives you a portfolio. You have a CV, and if you're contributing to an open source project, unlike most writers who never actually get their name in print, as Kurt Vonnegut said, we're weird. We reveal almost nothing about ourselves in our writing. I've written tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pages in my career. None of it has my name on it. All right, that makes us really weird as writers. But open source projects, your name is stamped all over the contribution. So you can say, I did that. And when you go to a job interview, you can say, this is what I did. It also gives you an opportunity to give your feet wet and it's volunteer, so you can walk away at any time you want. It gives you an opportunity to get your feet wet and understand, is this something for me? Do I find this boring? Do I hate this? Do I find the constant changing of technologies and sometimes prickly personalities something that I don't want to deal with in my working life? That's totally fine. That's a decision only you can make, right? So it gives you a chance to get your feet wet, understand, is this something for me? And it gives you a chance to learn the technologies, the processes, the audiences, the sort of terminology, all these things that employers are more likely to hire you if you can demonstrate some degree of familiarity with these things. So this is one way of short-circuiting that you need experience to get a job, but you need a job to get experience circle, which is just deadly. We in the industry in Finland talk a lot about how new people get into the field, and it's a serious challenge. And we need new people. We don't have enough. So I give you this for your consideration here today. I'm going to put Alexandra on the spot. Have I missed anything? Is there anything else that I need to say?
We still have time in the debate part.
Yeah, so I'll be around all day. But it's a great pleasure to share with you today if you field I deeply love, and I hope at least some of you found something today or find something later today that makes you think, that's for me. Because to tell the truth, 20 years ago, it never would have occurred to me that this was even something you could do for a living. Thank you for your time.